Hope docuseries. If you haven't checked it out, there are 4 wonderful segments, and you just spent a lot of time talking to people, listening to their stories.
Yes, thank you, and thanks for watching it. We're up to 4 now. But no, look, the choice model, for example, we're talking about that, and Kayan, the work that you've done, and Mark, that you did. The first time I really saw it in play was at Kumak when I went to visit them, because after I used them as a prop in a press conference, I figured I ought to go say hello. I'm candid, I really am. So, but the choice model really, it really makes a difference in people's lives, right? I think you know it all. You all know this way better than I do, because you live it day to day and you see it firsthand, and all the folks in the front line are really terrific. People come at their most desperate moment to a food pantry, right? Most people will struggle to figure out some other way to get by this day, to do something else, to beg, borrow, or steal to get there through it. And finally they capitulate and say, I need some help. And so when they walk into the place, they're probably a little bit defeated. But when you walk into a place, when somebody says, hey, thanks for coming. It's great to see you. Pick out a card. My friend Derek Smith from Franklin is just that guy. Franklin Township Food Pantry. Derek does a terrific job. And so many here others do. But when you walk in and all of a sudden somebody's nice to you, just a smile changes that person's day. And now the great part starts, right? Because now that person comes to understand that this is a place where I'm welcome, where this is a place that I don't have to feel embarrassed to go to. This is a place that people want to help me, and it builds the best thing that we can, trust. Because now they'll start to trust you, and now they'll start to believe in this place. And as we provide choice, as we recognize now that the cultural differences in food is really different. I'm an Irish guy. We have a really limited palate, you know. We don't like spicy stuff. No. So, but being able to do that, and now we have to work, you know, when we're trying desperately to deal with the next step, which is the language barriers, right? But here's what else, what I think is the best part about it. It gives us a choice. It gives us a chance, I should say, to help these people and move them along the line, helping them on to the next step, right? Because now they come, they feel welcome, they trust us, and now we can start to make the next step. And the next step is the next big step. We have a book in New Jersey about that thick of social programs. Those people are entitled to them, they ought to get them, and too often don't. They feel remote, they feel too challenged, or they don't know they're there, quite honestly. I couldn't name them. I couldn't remotely come close to it. But now if you have somebody who's there, and you know, like filling out a SNAP benefit. I've talked to folks who work in food pantries who know what the heck they're doing. It takes some time. Yeah. It's not a 5-minute process, it's closer to a 45-minute process or an hour. And that's when you know it, because we all know if you know how to do something, right? Like anybody here can probably go to Amazon and fill out the thing in just a couple seconds to get it done. But if you're not familiar with it, it's going to take you forever, and it's challenging, and it's sort of like me trying to fix something. There's a lot of cursing and blaming other people. And so you have to, but now somebody can help them. And now we've taken the next step, because now they're starting to get the social benefits that are. And now we can start to educate them about what it means to eat nutritious food. Now we can start to care about their health. We can start to move them along the line, try to help them find a job, make sure they have a house, find a place to live, and move them along the process to the point where hopefully they have reached the point where they're out, they're well cared for, they're working hard, and they don't need the food assistance, and maybe they even become a donor. And what you really are doing, ladies and gentlemen, is changing their lives. You have every person that you can do. You can move along that line. Even if you only stop at the trust part, you've certainly changed their lives. But when we change enough lives, we change the world. That's what you do every day. And that's why the choice program matters. Yeah. And that's why we have to continue to move along in that regard. Dignity, respect, caring, it's all there. We just have to make sure that people feel it.
And when we were talking about topics to discuss that would resonate, all 3 of them talked about choice, and I was like, oh, I get a platform to talk a little bit about choice. Most of you who know me know how passionate I am about the simple dignity of letting people choose their food, and yet it is not the norm. And part of our work at More Than Food Consulting and a lot of the work that we're doing nationally is to continue to emphasize that importance. And when we talk about moving from transactional to transformational, building those relationships, in order to engage and listen to people, it starts with that ability to give folks the ability to choose their own food. Just wondering if Kayan or Mark, do you want to just chime in a little bit about reducing the barrier and reducing the stigma of getting help by offering choice?
I'll start, and then I'll hand it to Mark. But
You can start, just keep going.
okay, this time I will. But choice is more important than we think sometimes when you're in poverty, and we know that food insecurity is just one part of the larger issue. Your choice is often taken away. You have to settle for, accept what's given to you, or it's, if you do this, you'll get this. Imagine just giving you the ability to say, I get to choose what my family eats tonight. I get to choose what I cook tonight. I get to say I don't like beans and I don't have to take them. That's personal, but for those of us, your food might be different, and that's where the issue comes in. That's where the stigma starts to build. If we're not seeing the person as a person and an individual, they didn't stop being themselves because they ended up in poverty and they became food insecure. And what I've noted is we love to label populations, and helps us buffer a bit from the large issues. And we have the food insecure population, we have the homeless population, and we probably all fit in one of those populations. But what if we were just people, mom to mom, woman to woman? I like chicken, you like chicken. Here's a recipe. How would I like that served to me and serve it to you that way? And so choice is the biggest way. It's not just giving you a choice in what you eat. It's giving back the humanity. It's giving back the dignity. It's allowing them to walk out of that building with their head held high instead of in shame and trying to hide the fact and run and put the bags away that they got food from a food pantry. And it means so much more. And I'm going to speak to this from both front lines and from being that mom who had to go shop for my groceries and who also had the experience of just getting a bag and not wanting to be ungrateful. But half of the things in that bag my children wouldn't eat. Or culturally, I didn't know how to make them. It also allows for one that further down the line, as you mentioned, if you give me dignity back and choice back in just what I eat, that goes with me to the next place I go to, the next social program I have to apply for, and it helps me to make those next decisions. It helps me to budget, because if you give me the food I can actually use, that money goes to a bill, and now I start to pay off debt, and now the cost of self-sufficiency is not so much, because you help me just a little bit down the road. So when you think of choice, it's not just pretty shelves, and what food did you put on those pretty shelves. It's much deeper than that. And others like me, we go out into the community and we say it. We say, when I went there, I was a person. When I went there, I got what I needed to feed my family. You should go there too. And we start advocating on a larger stage when we have it. And I am constantly saying we all should do it that way. And not just in food security, in everything. Give people back choice. That's their humanity. The right to choose, and poverty takes it away too often and every day.
I'll just quickly drive home something that Speaker and Kayan are saying, because for me, I'm taking an opportunity to just reflect as I listen to you both. And you know, too often in this work we do it and we forget what the stakes really are, and we get so embroiled in the day-to-day and the operations. But Speaker's right. When people come to you all, they're at their lowest point, right? And the goal is to give back a little bit of that humanity, a little bit of that dignity, and how different it would be and what a game changer it would be if that was the norm for all of us. Every time we went into our offices, we said the goal today is to give back a little bit more humanity, a little bit more dignity. What a game changer that would be.
Yeah, so that's part of an action step for all of you as you take home. Like, how can you incorporate just a little bit more dignity, a little bit more choice in the work that you do? Just to pivot a little that we know there's such a strong connection between food insecurity and health. And in order to help build nutrition security here in New Jersey, we need to make healthier communities and make it easier for people to access and afford healthy, nutritious food. For Speaker Coughlin and for Mark, can you talk about some of the innovative programs that are taking place with local farmers, local agriculture to make it easier to connect with healthy food?
I tend to talk a lot.
So I think one of the greatest things, shout out to Center for Nutrition and Health Impact, Eric, who you'll hear from in a little bit, and Amy, who couldn't be with us today. When it comes to agriculture, ready, Secretary? Like, this is for you, man. One of the greatest projects that CNHI and Dr. Jenny were able to create, and we'll share this with you all, the idea of building dignity and building choice and building agency is actually very much tied to empowering our farmers and building our local agriculture, right? So that that healthy food actually gets to where it needs to go. And what's really cool here in New Jersey, I'll give you specifics. So I've had the chance with Frank Minch, who's here, and you know, we have some agricultural pilots going on where we've connected and introduced some of the local farmers to some of the frontline organizations, because we know that you guys collaborate and text each other and say, hey, how can we help each other, right? And then what I've learned from Frank and from the farmers is that the farmers are doing the exact same thing. They're also going, hey, how can we help each other? How can we text? How can we text? How can we help each other? So these pilots, what's been really great, I mean, it's very hard, right? And we're nowhere near as far as Frank and I wanted to go, but the goal is, if we know that the frontline organizations are texting and collaborating, and we know that the farmers are texting and collaborating and innovating, how can we put them together? Very quickly, the other partnership I do want to lift up, and Speaker will probably talk about it too, Landisville Co-op, working with Food Bank of South Jersey. You know, even before I met Felix Donato, everybody in ag was talking about how cool this partnership was. And when we actually went to see it, when Jade Bocelli and I in the governor's office went to learn more about it, you want to talk about innovation, Katie, it's one of our major food banks, literally giving agency and power to an agricultural aggregator to say, all right, what can you grow? What do you have? Here's what we want. Here's what we'll pay. We'll pay what makes sense for you. We'll work with you. And then if Felix says, hey, look, there was a storm, there was a flood, there wasn't enough water, Food Bank of South Jersey goes in and says, okay, let's pivot. What can we do, right? So it's not our farmers being beholden to a system. Rather, it's a system adapting to what our farmers are going through. And it's just, those are just two of the really cool models that I think about when I talk about local ag.
Well, thank you. First of all, I want to acknowledge somebody. Katie, you referenced the video that we have done about going around and talking to people. The crew that put that together are here, so let's have a big round of applause for Justin and Rhonda and Chris. I made a silly joke about, actually a lot of people are watching it, and it's really terrific because they're really good at it. Look, what we have come to understand that farmers are a critical part of our state. I have had now the privilege of going out to farms throughout the state, which is really a nice way to spend the day, quite honestly, and call it work. But how important they are to our state, one of our biggest industries, but beyond that, how much of a partner they're willing to be. And so we have required that the food banks use some of their emergency funding, like 10%, to purchase money from, to purchase product from our local farms. And the good part about that is, because, you know, being a farmer is a really hard job, right? You're up really early, you stay out really late, you have to worry about things that most of us don't worry about. It has to be rain, but not too much rain. It has to be the right rain. It has to, the timing has to be good. The weather can be too hot. It can be too cold. There's insects. There's all kinds of challenges that they face, and then they don't control how much they sell it for, right? It's governed by some other market that they don't really, you know, they can participate in, whatever. And yet they continue to do on and make a difference. And so I think we have come to recognize that, and have worked with the farmers who have been great partners like that. When I do, you know, if I did a gleaning event last week. We do it every year, and the Farm Bureau is always there and represented, and they bring, you know, their folks to help go to whatever farm we're going to that day. They participate in all sorts of ways. So I think that one of the things we're trying to achieve is the hallmark of being innovative whenever we can. And so that is one of those places, as Mark described, the programs that we've contended, and we're going to continue to work with farmers. And you know, the more we can sustain them, the more we have a partner that's producing things that are critically important to the success of feeding people.
That's awesome. When we think about food preferences, a big movement these days is thinking about culturally preferred foods. And I love that, because so often when we think about nutrition and health, the focus is on, we just need to teach people how to eat better food. And I encourage all of us to turn that around 180 degrees and say, you know, let's hear from folks of what are the foods that they want, and then let's educate our food donors and others of this is what folks are really looking for. We know that food insecurity is rooted in systemic inequities. And at the beginning of September every year, the U.S. Department of Agriculture puts out their national data on food insecurity prevalence rates. And year after year, we know that Black and Hispanic households are more than twice as likely to experience food insecurity as white households. And that's based on structural barriers and systemic inequalities. So I would love for each of you to reflect on, you know, what are ways that we can design our programs and our policies to address these root causes and the structural barriers that make it hard for people to get enough food.
So I'll start.
Go, Cam.
And I apologize for being the person in the room that gets excited and passionate about trauma. But that's where it starts. I challenge that not just is trauma one of the root causes, but it is the main root cause of food insecurity and all the other circumstances that lead to food insecurity. And unfortunately, the same populations that are marginalized and constantly at a higher rate have faced the most trauma. And I think that's where it starts. We have to serve in a trauma-informed way. It is not an excuse. It is not a poor pity party. It is addressing a truth and a fact and starting from that place. It doesn't make you guilty, and it doesn't make that person lazy or less than. But if we address the trauma, then we start to address the actual systemic roots instead of this person is just hungry. Or we stop seeing the problems we expect to see. As a food pantry, we expect to see hungry individuals, right? If we are, you know, working in the homeless space, we expect to see homeless individuals. What if they were all the same person? And they usually are. So we have to go to that root, and then when we get to the root, we start addressing the actual barriers. What has happened that has allowed this person to not have the right access to resources, education, knowledge? And then when we start addressing that, we start getting there, and we start evening the race. Sadly, too many of us are starting behind the line, and none of us want that. I think we all agree everyone deserves safe, stable housing, food that they actually love and want to feed their family, and every other thing we can think of and every opportunity to grow. That's where it starts. It's the uncomfortable place to start, but it's where we must start. And the harder way to do the work, but the only right way to do the work.
I think for me, and thank you for that. It's one of the ways that you always taught me that we should be doing this work. In 1998, Katie, when the first that monumental piece of research on adverse childhood experiences came out, right? All the way in 1998 when it came out, it literally spelled out how we were supposed to combat adversity in childhood, right? It said the step one, you have to address like the immediate causes of trauma, right? Step two is you have to train people that are helping and seeing people that have been traumatized, you have to train them to spot the signs, right, on how to do it. And this is 1998 when we were talking about this. We had to address the immediate need that trauma had created. We then had to train our doctors, our food banks, our food pantries, our nurses, our researchers to spot the signs and recognize that this was about trauma. And then the third thing that we said all the way in 1998, we have to alleviate the burden of health on parents and caregivers, right? Alleviate the burden of health on parents and caregivers. So all the way in 1998, we recognized that this was a public health issue, that this was an issue of economic liberation, right, Jake? I saw Jake around here somewhere. And so when we're talking about systems and systemic issues that people have experienced, I agree with Kan completely. We have to understand what a person has gone through. We have to understand what a person is going through. Chairwoman Hayter and I were just talking about it outside. How hard is it for a person to use their WIC benefits, right? How hard is it for a mom or a dad to fill out a school meal application, right? If we actually look at those things and understand that that person is struggling to even just fill out an application for, as the speaker said, benefits that they are entitled to, right? They're entitled to these benefits, but if we don't understand that they come to us with the need to be seen, right? Then it makes it very, very hard to make a connection to that person. And what a game changer when we're able to design programs and policies acknowledging people as people.
Look, I couldn't have said it any better than Kayan did, and Mark is right. But I can tell you about what we're doing in terms of policy. Since the title is The Power of People in Policy, I'll talk about the policy part. I think our job is to listen to folks like Kayan and Mark, and that's why it's important to have them around, to tell us how do we design this. Now, look, I think there's 4 things that a state has to do to be great, and we're a great state, and we should. We have to make sure people are fed, make sure that people have a place to live. We have to make sure they have the health care they need. We have to make sure they have opportunity. I think that's largely done through public education. Now, I couldn't have a better partner than Shama Hayter, our chairwoman and my colleague and friend in the Assembly. But what we have done is try to recognize how do we start by uplifting everyone. So the first bill we did, A1, my first year as the speaker, was as preposterous as it was in 2018. We had to pass a bill to say women got paid the same as men. That's an important step. Now, I hope that that's actually happening, and I think we have to be mindful and have to make sure it's getting enforced. But the truth of the matter is, particularly if you have so many, a single mother who now deserves to be treated the same way her male counterpart is being treated. We just passed a bill, which I think is going to be remarkable in terms of creating affordable housing units. It's estimated to build 100,000 affordable housing units over the next decade. We have, as we've talked about a lot, committed money in the budget, come up with programs like, well, when there was a SNAP cliff, and Shama came to me and said, Greg, we got to do something. We immediately, we were already scheduled to raise the minimum SNAP benefits in New Jersey to $50 a month in January. Then we recognized that the cliff was coming because the feds were pulling out their additional support, pandemic support, and so we jumped to the 95. I think we're probably still one of the only, if not the only state that is at $95 a month. It's recognizing all of those challenges, right? It's recognizing the policies that we can put in place to help people, like rental assistance. We've made a big commitment to that in our budget. Making down payments for homes so that people can get started, right? The greatest wealth disparity between people of color and white people is home ownership, right? So let's change that. Let's do that. In fact, if you read, there's an excise tax on in our cannabis bill that made it legal that talks about where funding for that can be spent. And if you look at that, it's really a leg up. Our hand extended to bring people up, small business loans, housing, those kind of things. I think it takes a total approach to to recognizing that holistically, you need to address the root causes of these things. We've made mental health on parity with physical health, right? Because we recognize that, particularly for young people, by the way. It's scary how that is. Because so many of those things are the cause of food insecurity, right? People with mental challenges, people with no place to live, all of those things. It's a holistic approach to lift people up. And I think those policies, that's how we help. I mean, that's how we can help bring this about. In addition to committing funds, and we have. I think we've raised the funding for emergency food in our budget to $85 million. It's about a 400% increase since we started. So you have to commit dollars, you have to commit effort, you have to have it be purposeful, and you have to recognize that you can make a difference, right? That the policy really can change things. Mostly it makes a statement, though. Again, this like making food insecurity a priority, making those kind of policies a priority and giving them the attention that they deserve, because there's lots of competition, you know? Making them a priority is something real. And I think one of the things we did which is unique, and I'm proud of a lot of things we've done, but I think we, as part of a $11 billion economic plan to try to keep businesses and attract businesses and keep employees in New Jersey, part of that, hundreds of millions of dollars is committed to eliminating food deserts. So I'm not really sure other states are saying as part of their economic development plan, we need to eliminate food deserts. But we do that. And I think that's the kind of things that will help bring about change. Because we all know how important it is to have a grocery store, right? The convenience stores are okay, and the bodegas in some of the neighborhoods are okay, but they don't have the nutritious food that we need, and they're often too expensive, and they don't really help in the long run. So bringing including that, and it makes a statement to people. Hey, New Jersey really does care about addressing those social, systemic problems that we can change. It just takes a lot of hard work and commitment and leadership. So
that's awesome. And we know those policies work. When COVID hit, so many people had their jobs, the rug cut out from them. The federal government and state governments stepped up like they should, and we cut the red tape, and we made it so much easier for folks to get by. And food insecurity rates actually were steady and declined in many ways. So these policies work, and the fact that you at the state are committing dollars to maintain those levels is huge. We also know during COVID, some of that, the stigma of who needs help lessened because so many people needed help. And my fear is that we're going back to that old mentality, as Kayan, as you mentioned, of just seeing folks as other, of the stereotypes that we have of who doesn't have enough food. And when we think about bridging this gap of people and policy, how might we engage folks with lived experience so they can share their stories and break down those stereotypes so that we realize it's any one of us? And I think that is part of the power of influencing policymakers, influencing power makers of, how do we influence folks to think differently about food insecurity? Anybody want to, how do we break down those barriers and engage folks with lived experience?
Yeah, you have, you're the person who should speak on this one.
Thank you. It's so simple, and I promise you I'm not making light of it, but it's just the simplest thing. Take that picture out of your head of what a food insecure person looks like. I know before I was homeless, before I was food insecure, I had my own picture. And then I didn't look like it, because then we stopped trying to ask people to prove that they are, right? Take the picture out of your head and it's your neighbor, it's the grandma, it's the many people who are working and just can't make the ends meet. Take that picture out of your head and just go, like Katie said, any one of us at any time is probably less than a paycheck away from not knowing what we're gonna eat, take that picture out of your head and just say, you know what? How can I help you today? We know they're possibly food insecure, but how can I help you today allows them to say, this is what I need, this is how I need it, how can you help me? And that is the most empowering thing, that even at your lowest, somebody says what you have to say and how you choose to address that moment still matters. Hope that helped. And I said it's so simple just to say, hello, how can I help you? Without that picture in the back of your mind of what they should look like and how they should be acting and how they should respond to the help that you offer. That's a huge one. I know I struggle with it in my work in helping. You offer the help, and there is an expectation of how they should respond to it. Because I'm giving you these resources, and you should use them this way, and you should want, but did I stop to ask them if this is the most important thing to them in that moment? We only see one crisis. And while we may be going, do you need help with food? And they said yes, we don't know that they're 1 week away from losing the home, so they don't want to bring that food home because where's the home? So that's my take on it, and I could go all day about it, but thank you. And I wanted to go back to trauma informed because many people in here, of course I was nervous today, but I saw so many people who gave me the space and who I've had great conversations with, partnerships and organizations more than willing to have those uncomfortable conversations about trauma and what it does and the impact, and they're doing it. So New Jersey is doing more than just the first to address food insecurity. They're also addressing the trauma as a state, and each organization that I've worked with, and I'm sure I'll work with more of you, I wanted to shout that out because it's not a comfortable conversation, but they're willing to have it, and I am always excited to see it go into practice. Thank you.
I think for me, Katie, when you ask how do we incorporate lived experience, I will say that I think in my role now, it's no secret to Secretary Wengren and to Miko and to the speaker and his team. The way I'll answer your question is by saying I think in this role now, my job is to not just be out in community with all of you, but with the people that you all are serving, and really listen more than ever to what they're saying. And so that when I go into meetings with you, Speaker, and with the Secretary, I can say, this is what people are saying,
Yes.
right? And I think it's a practice of listening and taking it in and not trying to like respond at the moment, like what you say, right? Like, oh, you should do that, but rather absorb it and really be that microphone in a place where sometimes people feel like they don't have a microphone, right? And that microphone is in Trenton now. I think that's one of the most powerful ways that I feel I can incorporate, the voices of people with lived experience into the work that's happening.
That's great. Anything you want to add on that?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I think Kay Ann hit it right on the head, and I think she's 100% right. I think, we had 2 million unemployment claims in the state of New Jersey during the pandemic. It was a tsunami. And we all recognize that many, many, many families are just 1 or 2 paychecks away from being food insecure. And to your point, it happens in even the wealthiest of communities in this state. So let's not prejudge what don't conjure up in your mind the notion of what somebody who's food insecure looks like. It's everyone. And I think identifying those people and building the trust that we talked about in the beginning will let those folks be a spokesperson. I think you can recruit people to go out and talk about it, right? Yeah. We can point to success stories like you. We can point to people who are those folks who started off as a recipient and now are donors. And I think if we do that, then we'll build the notion that this is real. It happens in every town. It really does. It's why we work so hard to make sure we have things like school lunch. I want to have universal lunch and breakfast for schools. We're going to get there. Because of the stigma that goes along with that, right? That's why. Yes. Will we give food to kids who don't need it? Yes, absolutely. So what? Right? No, really. So some of them will do it. In an elementary school near me, there's a teacher who she collects what other kids don't want. She encourages them, if you don't need it, if you don't want it, you got your own lunch, just leave it, and then gives it back to the community, basically, to the people who do.
Yeah.
So let's give it to everybody. Let's eliminate. Let's make sure that the kids come in, because it all starts with
All of us.
feeding people, right? Imagine waking up. I say this all the time. Imagine waking up every day and saying, "Here's my job today, first and foremost. I have to figure out how to feed myself and my family." And it's not because I forgot to go to the grocery store last night. We're out of milk. It's because I have to find out, not only do I have to find and figure out how to feed them, I have to figure out the way to get the resources to do that. So if we let kids, and by the way, here's another thing New Jersey ought to be really proud of. The summer EBT program, we invested in that. And benefit in the state of New Jersey. It's 600,000 kids.
That's awesome. And we're going to wrap up in a second.
Now, 12 states turned down the money. 12 states turned down the money because they were calling it welfare and they couldn't do it. And that was a political statement. Well, shame on them. I hope they can't sleep at night.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
And maybe something else. Have a bad day. Anyway, so really, right? How do you look at some kid who's hungry and say, "Oh no, you have to"? We're not taking that money from the federal government. We'll send it here. We'll put it to good use. Anyway, we did, right? Because we invested in doing this. Anyway, the point was, how do we get people involved who become spokesmen? Because we have them come to believe that we're all pushing in the same direction and that they have a chance to make a difference by speaking up.
Awesome. I know we're at time, and I just want to say the power of people. Look around the room. Look at the power and the energy here today. We have nonprofit organizations, we have local ag, we have policymakers, philanthropy, researchers, students. I'm just going to give one quick shout out. Another thing you should all be super proud of in New Jersey is that Chris Costanzo from Food Bank News is here. And if you don't know, it's an amazing organization. And if you haven't signed up, Chris does this amazing, just raise your hand, Chris, so people can note every time. It's a twice monthly publication, and if you haven't signed up, sign up for Food Bank News, and she's based here in New Jersey, so super proud. I hope you all recognize the opportunity that you have to be national leaders on nutrition security here in the state of New Jersey. You have the opportunity to chart a course that other people will follow, and trust me, they're paying attention to you all. And today, I think we're at a pivotal time coming off of COVID and during this really important election year. If not now, when? If not you, who? And today is your day to collaborate, network, use this opportunity to get to know other folks around the room, feel inspired, and most importantly, commit to taking action. So thank you so, so much. Thank you.
Let's give another round of applause to Katie Martin, Speaker Craig Coughlin, and Ms. Kay-Ann Foster. We're going to take a 15-minute break, and then we'll see you back in here.
If they turn it on. Oh, there we go. All right, we've got a 2-minute warning. Grab your coffees, have a seat. All right, if you can hear my voice, please raise your hand. If you can hear my voice, raise your hand. Keep your hand raised and have a seat where you were sitting before. Hi, Jordan. Side of the room on my left, let's start sitting down. Thank you for following directions. Mark. Sit down. Sit. I usually become the strict one, so I'm trying to be patient. Okay. Okay. If not, I'll run back. We have lunch too, so it's fine. All right, I'm going to start counting now. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2.5, 2. Oh, this worked much better, Eric. 2, 1. Mark is the one that's late. I'm the one that's on time, so. All right. Hi, everyone. Good morning. I see many friendly faces and partners and friends out there, but if you do not know me, I'm Dr. Jenny Schrum. I'm the Research and Evaluation Manager for the Office of the Food Security Advocate. Thank you. Thank you. So I am very, very excited about our second session. Since the day I started at the office, Mark tasked me with what's the framework we're going to follow? How are we defining food security beyond just one sentence? How do we measure it? How do we think about all the amazing work that you all do? And what we adopted very formally, and many of you have also now shared adopting this, is the 6 dimensions of food security. So raise your hand if you know the 6 dimensions, if you learned this year, if you love them, me too. If you know me, you know I don't shut up about them. So we're very excited to have Dr. Eric Calloway here from the Center for Nutrition and Health Impact. Eric has led the charge when it comes to talking about the dimensions and how to measure them. And fortuitously, when we started working together, we said, did you see there's 2 new dimensions emerging in the literature? How exciting! Let's explore this together. So New Jersey's really formally adopted this framework, and we are the only kind of macro policy entity that's adopted this framework that very much lives in the literature and are enacting it in real life to enforce our decision making, and also what you've heard many of my words about appreciating the breadth of work that you all do. As you all know, it gets very easy to silo the types of work we do when it comes to food security because it's such a spectrum. And the framework really unites all of your efforts into one conversation and appreciates it all together. So it's not one person's responsibility to resolve food insecurity. If we lean on each other's strengths, resources, it really paints the full picture. So Eric is going to do a fantastic overview beyond what you all have seen me do. And what I want you to do while he's talking is, one, think about where your work fits into the dimensions, because I promise you anything you're doing is within it. But I also want you to think about how you fit into food insecurity. As the panel really framed Eric and set him up really well to talk about it, food insecurity is not about othering people. It is about every New Jerseyan, every person in the United States. We all need to rely on healthy, safe, and sufficient foods. And it's important to talk about the issue that way to start decreasing the stigma, which we know is very prevalent. This is an issue that touches everybody, and we need to acknowledge it that way. So please give a huge round of applause for Dr. Eric Calloway.
Thank you, thank you. Thanks, all right. Okay, it's working. Sweet. Well, thanks, everyone. Thanks for being here, and thanks for having me. I'm going to talk today about food security in New Jersey, the 6 dimensions of food security, like Ginny mentioned, and then some early findings from a study we're doing with Mark and Ginny around 2 emerging pillars. And I realize I'm standing between you guys and lunch, so we will stay on time, I promise. And Rosemary and I are going to be sort of coordinating moving slides, so yeah, you're perfect. So first, why is food security important? If you want to switch slides. Here's a definition of food security, and, it basically means households able to meet their food needs comfortably and in a way that's acceptable to them. And the main thing to take away here from this slide is that there are many facets to food security, and they sort of give rise to these 6 dimensions that Jenny was talking about. So this kind of shows how those 6 dimensions tie into the definition of food security. And we'll talk more about those dimensions in some later slides, but that's those listed there on the left. If you want to go to the next slide. All right, so just first, why is food security important? It's important for a number of reasons. The panel gave just a great overview, and I know you guys know this already. But food insecurity, or not being food secure, is a key driver of our deadliest chronic conditions like heart disease and diabetes. And some of the main mechanisms are food insecurity leads to increased systemic inflammation, leads to compensatory behaviors like foregoing medication so you can afford food, and leads to compromises in dietary quality. If you want to go to the next slide. So in New Jersey, about 800,000 people are facing food insecurity. And as the panel mentioned earlier, and as you guys all know, many more are just one setback away from also being food insecure themselves. High cost of living and long distances to grocery stores are some of the key drivers in New Jersey for food insecurity, in addition to other socioeconomic issues that compound these problems. And so what are the conditions needed for food security to be established in a population? We'll go back to those 6 dimensions in the next slide. So here are those 6 dimensions. And if you want to just click next, we'll just kind of highlight these 4 here. So these 4 have been around for a bit. These are kind of the traditional 4 dimensions, or you may have heard them called 4 pillars of food security. Since kind of the aftermath of World War II all the way through the 1990s, our understanding of the food insecurity experience has evolved, and we've kind of established these 4 pillars here, or dimensions. So availability just means food needs to be physically present in the environment. And then accessibility kind of takes it one step further. So not just does that food need to be there, people need to have financial and physical access to that food. And then kind of one step further with utilization, not only having access, but people need to be able to turn that food into a healthy meal. And then stability just refers to kind of how food security status can change over time for households. And then if you go to the next slide, these 2 are emerging pillars. These are kind of emerging concepts as our understanding of the food security experience has evolved. Sustainability refers to the ability of the food system to continue to provide food for future generations. Then agency refers to households' ability to act on their own food decisions. So these two dimensions were the focus of our research study with Mark and Jenny. And it's really the first study looking at how to conceptualize agency and sustainability in the U.S. And before we kind of get into those study findings, I want to just move to cover some things New Jersey is doing across those 6 dimensions right now, just so you can kind of get a sense of, how your work might fit into these dimensions and other kind of similar projects. So these will really be examples of the types of actions that can be done to address these issues. Definitely not an exhaustive list by any means, but here's some efforts that are helping to address availability and physical access to food. So the Food Desert Relief Program helps get grocery stores into areas that don't have them. And then the Retail Innovation and Delivery Grant helps to fund innovative grocery delivery models to get food into communities that have low access to grocery stores. And then on the next slide are some programs that address financial access, utilization, and stability. So SNAP is, federal nutrition program, a really key one that many households rely on, and New Jersey was the first state to raise the SNAP minimum to $95 using state funds to supplement the federal funds. New Jersey also provides benefits to families with school-age children who rely on the free and reduced lunch program during the school year. They don't have that during the summer, so this helps them during the summer. And then SNAP Ed funds programs across New Jersey that teach healthy, budget-friendly cooking skills. And then also sustainability and agency, the 2 emerging dimensions. So for example, there are gleaning programs that get produce that can't be sold, maybe because it doesn't quite look like it should, but it's still perfectly fine to families in need. And then choice pantry models where people can select their food sort of like a market rather than getting a pre-packaged box that may or may not meet their family's needs. So those 6 dimensions are all really huge issues, and none of these programs alone are going to solve those, but these are kind of examples of things that can be coordinated and scaled to help New Jersey families in need, and using the 6 dimensions as a framework for thinking about different ways to help. So if we go to the next slide, I'll get into some of early findings from our study of agency and sustainability in New Jersey. We're still kind of in the early stages, but I think we have some interesting stuff to share for today. So here's the 2 official definitions of agency and sustainability as they relate to food security. These terms have different meanings in other fields, but in food security, this is how they're defined. And just some key things to point out here are that agency really has 2 parts to it. So it's people's ability to make their own food choices, and that we're just calling food choice agency. Then also people's ability to influence the food system around them, and so we're just calling that civic engagement agency, at least for the reports we're doing. And then the other thing is sometimes people confuse sustainability and the stability dimension because they're kind of a little bit similar. So stability is more about at the household level and their changes in food security over time, and usually shorter time frames, whereas sustainability is more about the food system as a whole and more longer time frames like generations. So first, why are these things important? So, building agency means that you're building people's dignity. That was talked about a lot during the panel earlier. You're also enabling responsive policy making, so responsive to people's actual needs and getting input from the communities actually facing those issues, and also enabling people to make healthy choices. So, people really want to make healthy choices, but they're not able to due to a variety of reasons. And so here's a quote. This is from a different project, and it's a different state, and it was a few years ago. But this kind of always really stuck with me. So this is a grandmother in Tennessee who lives in subsidized housing. She has diabetes, and she mainly eats peanut butter and white bread sandwiches because that's what she can afford. So that's kind of what her meals typically are. She was talking with her doctor, and this is a quote from that. So she says, the doctor's talking to her about diabetes, and she said, the doctor's telling her, eat more protein, less carbohydrates. And she's thinking in her head, that's nice. I can't do it, but it's nice. They don't really understand. I don't have control over a lot. So I think, that quote really helps kind of explain this link between agency and health. And then just the last thing on that slide, and that's fine, you can just keep it here, just the importance of sustainability. Also, I wanted to touch on that's kind of a little bit more intuitive for a lot of people, but what's important about sustainability, of course, is that we can keep getting food to people and that we can maintain the livelihoods that are provided by the food system. So for this research project, we set out to understand agency and sustainability in New Jersey, and the whole point was so that we could inform policy actions and future measurement activities. We talked to 55 people, including a bunch of people who are experiencing food insecurity in different areas across the state. We also talked to a bunch of people who represented either anti-hunger organizations, food security organizations, or were in the food system in other ways, farmers, people in retail, people in food manufacturing. And so we analyzed the interview data, and then we have some themes we can talk about today. And so if we want to go to the next slide, just first we'll talk about agency. And then, so here are some quotes just to kind of give you a flavor of some of the things that we heard from people. So just kind of starting from the top, so the top quote is really talking about how a lot of people are reliant on the food that's available at the food pantry. And so when they are able to go to the food pantry, the food that is there, those are the choices they have. So that's kind of one limiter of choice. The next quote, as you might expect, sorry. We didn't practice this. So the next quote is, really, as you might expect, affordability is a key limiter of choice. If you can't afford it, you can't make that choice. And the last quote here is, people talked a lot about barriers that they encounter in trying to influence the food system around them. And then the next slide. So these are some of the, and I know you can't read that figure over there, but these are some of the key drivers of agency in New Jersey, at least according to our interviewees. And there's a lot here. And we'll be putting out some papers to describe all this info in more detail. But I'll give kind of an overview right now. And starting with food choice agency, these factors kind of fit into levels. So at the macro level, we had things like food economics, land and climate issues, the regulatory environment, and social issues. Then kind of moving one step down to the food system was agriculture. So, that, of course, determines what food is there and a lot to do with what the cost of that food is. And then nutrition assistance programs would help people get access to food and have other choices that they may not have otherwise. And then kind of moving down into the food environment, the food that's available and accessible to people, and then also access to programs that can help them. And then down to the individual level, things like food skills and equipment. So if you don't know what that food is or how to cook it, or you don't have the equipment to do it, then you can't make that choice. And health and cultural needs and preferences also, of course, influence choice. Then moving to the civic engagement agency piece of it, people had less to say about this because, you don't make choices about influencing the food system every day like you do about food. So it's not an experience that's as relevant to people, but they did have a lot of really good insights. One of the, so looking at those factors, looking at the macro level, one of the big things that came up was this insider-outsider dynamics. So a lot of people feeling like, well, you have to be an insider to make any change. I'm an outsider. The system isn't set up to listen to me. And then social barriers was another one that people talked a lot about. If you, working multiple jobs or you need childcare, you're not going to be showing up to a, city council meeting. And then a bunch of other factors. So people talked a lot about organizational coordination across the state, and how if you make change in one area, a lot of systems don't talk to each other. So it's kind of a piecemeal process. We heard also a lot about organizational capacity to do community engagement was needed. Organizations needed more support. So a lot of organizations that work to address food security needed more support to have the capacity to do good community engagement work. And then at the individual level, attitudes towards government and political processes, so people feeling like, well, they don't care about me, I can't make a change, we only see them when they need our vote, and then we don't see them again. So all of those things driving people's ability to influence the food system. So if we go to the next slide. Wanting to kind of move into what are some actions that can be taken. And so kind of what our process was here was we reviewed a ton of reports that have been put out recently about New Jersey and that were related to food security. And we looked at all the recommendations that were in those reports and kind of mapped them to the themes that we were seeing. And again, this is kind of, there's a lot of information here to unpack too, just like the last slide. And so we'll have more information in papers that come out. But just to kind of give an overview, some of the short-term actions include making it easier to enroll in benefits, making benefits more impactful, promoting choice models in emergency food, and supporting activities like food policy councils. Some long-term actions were creating one-stop hubs for benefit enrollment, supporting efforts to reduce food production costs, so helping farmers out to reduce costs there to ultimately make food more affordable. Continue efforts to address food deserts and work to streamline food systems governance models, especially including models that incorporate community engagement and community input. And then next on to sustainability. And so here's some quotes that we heard around sustainability. So just sort of starting from the kind of brownish one on the left, these quotes describe issues like food waste. That came up a lot of talk about food waste. The red quote is really around kind of difficulties bringing up the next generation of farmers. And the blue quote, need for building and sustaining market demand for local foods. So these weren't the only themes, but just some quotes that really helped explain some of those themes well. And if you go to the next slide, please. Again, some key drivers here of sustainability in New Jersey, according to our interviewees anyway. So the first kind of grouping was about the need to consider demographic trends and demographic changes. The need to think about the regulatory and political environment. Are we over-regulated maybe, perhaps? Our interviewees thought so. And land and climate issues. The next kind of grouping there is about food affordability, food access, access to good jobs, and addressing food waste. And then the next grouping there was about sustaining local agriculture, supporting the next generations of farmers, land use struggles. We heard a lot about that, and the need to address markets and costs. Then the last little grouping there is about community food needs, so different needs that different communities have, different programmatic needs that different communities have, funding for food and agriculture, education, and infrastructure. And then the next slide. So again, took the same approach for the recommendations here. So these are, kind of pulled from recent reports that we mapped to our themes. And so some short and long-term actions here. Short-term actions include educating consumers on food waste, continue efforts to promote local foods, educate on food needs of growing immigrant populations, support public education on farming and skill building for new farmers, and address land use policies and other barriers for new farmers. And then some long-term actions were include funding, infrastructure, and coordination around food waste, subsidize and build profitable supply chains for institutional and commercial buyers of local foods, fund climate mitigation infrastructure for farmers, and include climate change adaptation policies and plans in state and local planning, and investigate the need for increased New Jersey food processing and distribution capacity. And then the next slide, we'll just get into kind of some next steps for us with this research and this work with the Office of the Food Security Advocate. So we're wrapping up this first year's work, which again intended to inform action planning and future measurement efforts. And then we'll have some publications out, like I mentioned, where you'll get all the details of some of the stuff I had to kind of just skim over there. And then in this upcoming phase of the work, we're going to be focusing on measuring across the 6 dimensions and across New Jersey, really with the goal of informing, what are the issues and where, and also kind of setting a benchmark from which we can measure future progress across these issues. And that's all for me. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Good? Yeah. Hi. Thanks, Eric. So I hope you all appreciate how much New Jersey's voice is part of this emerging concept of food insecurity. It's quite an honor to be working with the Institute and thinking about how we measure this and how we inform kind of macro policy perspectives and all of your work. And I hope you all feel seen by the framework, and I hope it helps you dream about the future and how you can expand your work and efforts. So I know everyone wants to go to lunch. So we're going to break for lunch, and we're going to go till about 1:20 for lunch, but 2 exciting things. Katie Martin is going to be doing a book signing at 12:30. So if you brought your book, go get it signed. I got mine signed last year. And then Dr. Dan is going to be talking about school meal applications at the same time at one of the breakout rooms. So if you're looking at the elevators, you go around to the left and around the corner. You'll find it. We'll point you in the direction. And thank you for being a great audience this morning. It was a pleasure, and we'll see you later.